his talking point over the last several months has been that school boards aren't using their funds efficiently, and they're wasting money.
We are back on Closer Look Thursday, one day closer to the weekend with Michael Calandra, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Sometimes I just sit and I have these weird musings that just kind of, weave in and out of my brain. And
Random thoughts?
Random thoughts. And it came to me as I reached out to OPSU last night, trying to get JP Hornick on to talk about the mandated provincial employees back to the office. And I thought, isn't it ironic that those that sit in the legislature are not sitting until mid to late March, and that is their place of work. That is their office. Yet they're not there.
Yes, I'm sure they would argue that their office is their entire riding and that they're working hard talking to the people that voted for them and the people they serve. But
Look,
it is
I didn't say my random thoughts were right.
No,
I just said they were.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
Did you go to school?
For a very brief time.
Funny story. It's an honest question. I'm not being sarcastic.
I never know with you. I did go to school. I kind of went in stages. It's a long story. It's actually an episode in itself. I won't bore you with the details.
Tomorrow night's episode?
But I am a graduate, barely, of the Near North School Board.
Yes, which has made plenty of headlines in the last couple of weeks. Yes, very good. A lot of people probably know, that's one of the 6 school boards now under control of the provincial government.
And I had nothing to do with it, for the record.
I was going to say, you're not, you weren't a trustee there.
No.
You ran for trustee.
I was guilty of a lot of things.
Yes.
I can't be held responsible for that.
Yeah. But it's an issue that's kind of played out, especially right before Christmas. There was a lot of discussion about Bill 33 that was passed in the Ontario legislature, which gives the government more powers to take over school boards that they deem are not up to snuff, that are incompetent was one of the words that the education minister used, just the way they're spending money. Really, underneath all this is this ongoing debate about whether school boards even need trustees anymore.
Yes.
And the Ford government's contemplating that. And the education minister has promised an answer. He first promised it at the end of 2025. He's now saying it's going to be early this year. So we're kind of waiting on whether that'll be a huge change in the way school boards are operated.
Yeah.
But he's said in the past that he doesn't see a reason why the $43-some-odd billion education budget needs to be run by trustees. It's going to be done strictly via the government. So that's a big question that's dominating discussion around the education sector right now about the big changes. In the meantime, the government's taken over now 6 school boards that they feel are not managing their money very well. There's been talk about EQAO, standardized testing, being reviewed, all kinds of different things happening in the education sector. Sinead Dougal, who's our deputy editor at the Trillium at Queen's Park, is a fantastic education reporter. She's been covering these issues day in and day out. And she's going to join us today to kind of bring us up to speed on what kind of happened over the last couple months, while some people may have been focused on the Christmas season, and then what we can look forward to in 2026.
There is a lot going on in the world right now, to say the least. So you may have missed some of the big news lately. As it relates to Ontario education, the Ford government is promising a full review of the curriculum, a full review of standardized testing, and it recently passed new legislation that makes it a lot easier for the province to take control of school boards that are, to use the minister's words, incompetent. Here to help us get up to speed on all the changes and what we can look forward to in 2026 is our education expert at Queen's Park, Sinead Dougal, the deputy editor of the Trillium. Happy New Year, Sinead. Great to see you. Thanks for your time tonight.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me back.
All right, Sinead, can we start with the legislation that was passed back in November, Bill 33, the Supporting Children and Students Act? What new powers does that give the province?
Yeah, so this bill was a bit wide-ranging in that it included changes to the kindergarten to grade 12 system, post-secondary education, and also the child and youth services sector. But when it comes to the K-12 system, it does a couple of things. So it made it easier for the province's education minister to take control of school boards. It also expanded the minister's authority over school names. It, allowed him to require boards to post publicly about trustee and senior staff expenses, and it also required school boards to implement school resource officer programs if local police services offer them, which is basically having police in and kind of involved in the school communities. When it comes to school board takeovers, what it allowed the education minister to do is it kind of removed the need for him to wait for a third party recommendation on whether or not to take control of a school board. So it essentially gave him more power to do that and do it quicker. And we did see that happen, soon after the legislation passed, with the province or the education minister taking over the Near North District School Board.
And at last count, I think there's now 6 under the province's control, Sneh, is that correct?
That's correct. And all of them were taken over last year.
So what you're saying is it was harder to do that before this legislation. They had to go through some more hoops, and now basically they have free reign to do that if they feel it's necessary?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of removes that step where you have an external party essentially recommending that, okay, yes, the province should take over the school board. Like with Near North, the government did have a review of the board back last fall. But the minister had kind of said he was going to wait to see what that review said, and then he would decide based on recommendations that he had given the board and how the board fulfilled or didn't fulfill them, whether or not he was going to take the board over. And so he decided to do that.
Sneh, did this happen a lot before the Ford government? Like were previous governments taking over school boards this much?
It did happen occasionally, but not as frequently. I mean, we saw 6 just last year, which is a lot. And they were done in kind of batches. So there was 4 at one time. 1 had been done earlier, and then we saw 1 get taken over in December.
So, Sneh, what's the rationale? Why is the province taking over school boards? Don't they have enough things to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, according to the minister, he's essentially, kind of looked at a bit of an overhaul of the system, or that he is looking at one. So that includes trustees and what is going to happen to trustees. That also, part of that is just kind of school board governance and how school boards have been handling finances, or how he thinks they have been managing finances. It's been an ongoing discussion for years about advocates, unions, all saying that the education system is underfunded. The minister has now, his talking point over the last several months has been that school boards aren't using their funds efficiently and they're wasting money. That the government is giving enough money into the education system is just not being used in the right way. So by taking over school boards, I mean, a bunch of them were taken over with the government claiming that there was financial mismanagement, that they had been running deficits for years, and that this was going to be a way for the government to really see what was happening. So we're kind of still waiting. I mean, we've seen some things trickle out. I think it's a bit of a waiting game still to see, the financial aspect and and what comes out of that and what these supervisors are apparently finding while they're in there. But I mean, the whole idea has kind of been that, like, the talking point has been like the mismanagement of money and trustees like wasting time and focusing on things that are not important and not helping students. So
Sneh, is it more of a preventative move, a reactive move, or would you say it's a bit of both?
Probably a bit of both. With some of the school boards that the province said were not being managed properly when it comes to finances, or had been running deficits. In that way, the government might say it's a bit of a reactive move, but the minister has also kind of said, like, this is a proactive measure that they're doing to ensure that funds are getting to students in the classroom. So I think it will probably take a bit more time to see how that actually pans out and whether we're seeing, concrete results as a result of these takeovers.
I definitely want to get into the question about trustees, because that's the big looming question we're all waiting for an answer to this year. What's going to happen there? But it is fascinating when you read some of the details about these school boards. We mentioned the Near North School Board, for example, the more recent one. I believe the education minister called it a quote-unquote mess. But some of the details are pretty shocking, right? There was a school that was supposed to be built that wasn't. There was questions about what the director of education was actually doing.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about what we know about what was going on in that board?
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, there were a lot of delays with the opening of a new K-12 school in Parry Sound, and that, a lot of concern from the community there. And that was probably kind of what triggered that review in the fall that the government did. But through that, they also came up with, some other issues that they found. You mentioned the director of education. There were some concerns about use of, the corporate credit cards, just where the director was working out of. Apparently, the minister had said it wasn't out of the board office. And so, they had issued a bunch of recommendations to the board, including that the director move back and start working out of the board office. But I mean, there was a bit of confusion there too, because when the government actually announced that they were taking over the school board, the minister said that he had no idea what was actually happening with the director of education, whether he was on leave or whether he had been fired, we had asked the minister at the time, because he had said that he was going to appoint a new director or an interim director. And the question was, well, how are you going to do that if you don't even, if you don't know what's currently happening with the current director? And he kind of said, regardless of the circumstances of the current director, he was going to look at appointing someone else. So we actually just heard earlier this week that a new director of education had been appointed, and the previous one had been reportedly on leave and then retired from the board. So there was just a bit of kind of, yeah.
It is fascinating. And as you said, super clear. Yeah, as you said, underneath the surface of all this is this question of whether this government thinks we need trustees at all. And Paul Calandra has not been shy about the fact that he thinks there's plenty of reason why the ministry itself can run the $43 billion budget that's spent on education every year, and that he's going to make a final decision. It was originally going to be by the end of last year, the end of 2025,
right.
And now it's early 2026 is the timeline we have. What are you hearing about when this decision could come?
Yeah. I mean, so probably similar to what you have, but the last that we did hear from the minister was, like you mentioned, we had expected to hear something by the end of the year, but the last that we heard from him, he had said he wasn't going to have a decision by the end of last year. He didn't have. He hadn't been able to take any proposals to cabinet yet. And what he was doing was that he had said that, what's kind of taking some time is that he wanted to make sure he had done all his homework when it came to charter or constitutional rights, specifically for French language and Catholic boards.
Yes.
There are, the Catholic boards that are under supervision, even though in the other boards, the trustees aren't, they're not involved. They're not they're not doing what they were put in place to do just because of the nature of the boards being under supervision. With the Catholic boards, the trustees are in a small way still involved when it comes to denominational issues. And so he said that he wanted to kind of look into that and make sure that he has all those things in order before he makes any decision on what to do next. He did say that when he should be in a position when the legislature resumes to kind of provide more clarity on where they're going to go with this. The legislature actually is now not coming back until, a few weeks into March. So it's a bit unclear now whether he's going to wait until that time to, to table any legislation and that be the first that we hear of it, or kind of preview it in advance and say that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So we're still waiting for any news on that. But I mean, from the comments that he has made, I think it was in early or sometime in December, when he was asked about it, he had mentioned that there was nothing to date that had really changed his thinking or moved him from where he had been months before. And that was that he believed trustees weren't necessarily the right avenue to deliver, education in Ontario. So I don't think anything's changed from his perspective.
When we hear, I'm sure you'll be the first to tell us. So we'll look forward to your reporting.
Definitely.
just to be clear, Snake, because some people are asking this, nothing's on the table about amalgamating the public and separate school boards. That's not something that the Ford government's considering.
The minister has kind of said he's not looking at doing that, because there were some rumors at one point about possibly some sort of an amalgamation, but we haven't heard anything suggesting that up until this point.
Sinead, just back to the trustees for a sec. What's the reaction been to the possibility, either from the opposition or education experts?
About eliminating trustees, they've been very critical of it. They have basically called it, a power grab. They have said in many instances that trustees are the go-to for families who may not have or may have run out of other avenues to kind of voice concerns and get issues dealt with related to their children. So they have been very concerned about that. The government has, countered that by essentially announcing that they're requiring school boards to set up this year student and family support offices. And these would be offices where, families can turn to if they have concerns or issues that they feel that they need to be dealt with. But the minister has kind of said repeatedly that, first steps for families should always be teachers and principals and trying to solve issues within schools. That hasn't really negated the fears that people have of just the elimination of trustees, though, and having elected officials being able to kind of stand up for families or for kids who may need it within the system.
This has been hugely educational, to say the least, pardon the pun. But the last thing I want to ask you, Sneh, and in the middle of all this too has been some discussion about EQAO, the standardized testing, that the results, I believe you were reported at the time, were actually delayed a little bit because they were looking at some things, and obviously the minister's not happy with those results either and wants to take a look at that. What are you hearing on that front? Are they looking at tweaking the testing, changing the testing, or just putting more emphasis on the test?
Yeah, so the minister has said he's not looking to get rid of the EQAO testing, which is something that, some advocates have called for. But he said he's not looking to get rid of it, but he thinks that some changes could probably be made. With the results that came out recently, the scores had gone up when you look at grade 3, grade 6 students for math, for reading, writing, and math. But in some areas, it was very minimal increases. And so the minister, said at the time that that improvement is not happening fast enough, and that he wanted to look into why that was happening. So that involved looking at the testing. It also involved he's looking at kind of the curriculum and how students are taught. Is the curriculum clear and consistent? How does what they're taught, how does that kind of relate to what they are what they're tested for in these standardized tests? Whether teachers have the right supports that they need. So there's a few things that they're looking at there. And he's going to be appointing a two-person kind of external advisory body to do that. But we haven't, he said he would announce that in the new year sometime. So we don't know who exactly is going to be conducting that review just yet.
All right, Sneh, before we let you go, anything else on the education front that we didn't cover tonight that we should have?
I think there's enough. There's enough going on.
Yeah, that's right.
Just wanted to make sure our I's were dotted.
We might have to do a 6-part podcast on this, right?
Right.
It's interesting how all your answers are like, well, we're going to find out this year what's out. Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to this year.
It's going to be a busy year.
Big year.
It is for sure. It'll be a busy one on the education front. Although, sorry, actually, I should mention negotiations are also going to be coming up for contracts, for teacher contracts and whatnot. So that'll be another thing to look forward to.
There we go.
It's going to be a busy year. All right, there's our
get some rest, Sneh.
Education expert and deputy editor at the Trillium, Sneh Dougal. Sneh, always good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
So if this happens and they eliminate the need for trustees, would you refer to that as unprecedented?
Well, I don't remember how long they've had trustees, but as far as I've been alive, they've had trustees. Yeah. That's the way school boards have operated. And that would be definitely the massive change would be the right term, right? It'd be a different way that they operate school boards. It's an interesting issue, right? And Sneh's so good at reporting on this issue because she's getting the all sides of the debate, all sides of the argument. The other side, which she's reported on too, is that it's like a $43 billion budget for education in Ontario, right? And we live in a province where people are very passionate about tax dollars and where they're going.
Yes.
And the Ford government said that some of this money is being wasted. It's not a matter of you need more money. It's that it's not being used properly.
But isn't that the pot calling the kettle black?
Yeah, well, but that's the way it is, right? I mean it's a good point. If you read the Trillium, you can definitely make that argument. But the average parent who reads that figure at $43 billion and
Right.
isn't happy with the education their kid is getting might be
Yes.
saying, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
They aren't putting the money where it should be. It should be in special needs. It should be in special education, or it should be here or there. And it's a very heated debate, education, right? We all are touched by the school system. We went through it. We have relatives and friends who are teachers, who are EAs, principals. It's a very challenging environment to be. And the one thing I'll say for sure, having lots of family I'm not a teacher, I couldn't be one for 5 minutes, not for 5 minutes. All of us do have.
We all do. Yeah. Yep.
It's a very challenging system to be in, and sometimes it would be helpful if maybe a minister spent a week teaching a grade 4 class in somewhere in Ontario, and then maybe they'd get a little bit of a different opinion on what it'd be like. Because
that's the thing, right?
You and I would have a contest of who would be out of there first.
Oh,
it wouldn't last. I wouldn't last 5 minutes.
No.
So I think there's all those things that go into it. But these decisions, I think it's fair to say, and I'm no expert, but I think it's fair to say the Ford government knows that there's a good chunk of people that are on their side and saying we're wasting funds. We're not putting funds where they need to go. But again, there's lots of people who say the Ford government would be wasting money. And
hey, how about a tunnel?
Yeah, how about a tunnel? Or if you Google Skills Development Fund and the Trillium, you might have a different opinion too.
But I think your point is an extremely valid one. It's very easy to be an armchair quarterback. Mm-hmm. Spend some time in the classroom, the overcrowded, non-air conditioned classroom.
Yeah, that's right.
And we could go on.
That's right. It's a great point. And I would assume that many advocates are calling on the minister to do just that.
Yeah. All right. Well, as Snay said, 2026, going to find lots of answers to those questions.
Yeah.
Closer look at villagemedia.ca. We would love to know your thoughts. Flip us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And, of course, sign up at closerlookpodcast.ca. Derek Turner at the helm this evening. As always, for Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 7 right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.